Chapter 3, 1 year earlier. A small beach in the island nation Federation, 337 solar year. Woof, woof, come on boy, you'll have to do better than that if you want to catch the big one, yelled a young man. Again, woof, woof, as if in agreement barked the medium-sized and energetic collie-styled dog, complete with brown and white trim from head to toe, started to run faster and faster toward the shore. About 3 paces behind the dog was running a young man who had medium sandy brown hair that was held back from his face by a long red bandana with 2 black serpents stitched into both sides of each end. He had a medium-size build and light blue eyes. He was wearing dark pants, boots, and a white shirt, but over the shirt was a type of vest that was light-colored save for the black trim along the collar and edges where a series of small holes ran up and down each end where laces ran through left to right, like on a shoe. 2 gauntlets on each forearm and a belt on his waist that had 2 short swords and sheaths attached completed his wardrobe. The garb, in addition to being a little worn and ragged, was also a bit big on him, as though it were not made for him originally. Running through the forest he could hear the waves of the ocean getting louder, and looking up ahead he could see the brightness of the clearing, which the dog had just reached. As he approached the edge of the tree line, he blinked his eyes quickly to adjust to the sudden increase of illumination. A second later, as his vision refocused, there before him was a barking dog standing between the deep blue salty sea and a giant reddish-pink crab spanning over 5 feet in diameter. "Careful, Rain!" yelled the man. "Don't get too close to his claws," he said, as the man drew out his twin blades with a single fluid motion that only one with decades of experience could have done. Rain's barking became more intense as he moved toward the crab, only to back away again. Advancing and retreating, rough. Snap went the left claw of the crab, lunging straight out and up, then down towards the dog. Seeing his opening, the man drove forward like a bolt of lightning, his right arm and sword extended out as the tip of his blade quickly made contact with the soft flesh of the beast. The crab wrapped in pain and angered as blood and water started to stream out from under its joint where its body and claw connect. Rain began barking with all the more intensity and frequency as the king crab shivered and fought to rid itself of the searing pain of the human's sword. Suddenly, the creature stopped squirming around, and with all its might it brought its other claw around, swinging full force at its predator. The man, detecting just in time the movement, tucked and rolled forward, nearly averting a direct blow that could have easily killed him. However, in this he had to release his one blade, which was still stuck in the underarm of the king crab, and to make matters worse he had dropped his other blade in his process of rolling. By this point, Rain had stopped his advancing and retreating and was now running circles and pacing around the battle. Quickly and seemingly with ease the warrior rose to his feet and regained his balance, only to abruptly have everything turn dark. "Damn, his ink. Stupid, how could you forget?" he said to himself. "Stay back, boy, it's poison," shouted the man as he tried to make his way back and out of the shroud of black mist before he passed out from no air or the poison got to him. "Yelp!" cried the dog. "Rain!" yelled the man, as if seeming to no longer care about unseen danger, picked up his pace and came running out of the toxic mist, only to run into another swinging claw coming at him. This time falling down and sliding backwards towards the creature. The warrior was stopped suddenly and painfully as the arm of the now raging crab crushed the youth to a sudden halt. Looking over, he saw Rain in the same position as he was, pinned down under the maimed, but still functioning, claw. Their warrior struggled to free himself uselessly under the weight of the huge creature. As he looked up at the vexed beast, only to have a small shimmer catch his eye. His sword was still plunged in the underarm of the crab. Not knowing where his other sword was, this one was his only hope if only he could free his arm to reach it. Looking to his left hand, "Guess, I have no choice. No, Rain might get hit, he's too close," said the man to himself. Out of nowhere, suddenly, a whistling sound followed by a thud from impact, and finally then the roar of renewed pain. The crab turned toward the direction of this new attack, freeing the man and his dog. The man quickly rose to his knees and the dog ran behind his owner. Less than a moment later another whistling sound, thud, and roar. It was a second arrow. The creature, uncertain of what to do as its new attacker was somewhere in the small dark linings of the forests where it could not go, decided now instead to move toward the sea in its attempt to retreat from the unseen danger. With his faithful companion safely behind him, the man, who now standing fully upright, his left hand extended into the air, murmured something under his breath as a sinister purple and green cloud began to glow around the king crab. It was utterly frozen in fear as an unworldly and haunted scream bellowed out in the surrounding area. Then pop, snap, crack, as strange rays of dark purple, green, and crimson fell like rain on the creature's hard shell, penetrating it like a hot knife through butter, killing it instantly. The strange glyph that had appeared above the man was now gone, along with the ominous light show and screaming. This whole deadly scene of events took less than a few seconds from start to finish. Walking over to the now very dead and smoking crab, the man removed his other blade. Rain was still trekking close behind his master's side. "It is all right, old boy, I think. We're both getting a little too old for this much excitement," he said quietly to his four-legged companion. Shaking off most of the residue from his sword, he extended it to the forest, pointing, and said, "Are you going to come out now, Flare?" Stepping out from the tree line, bound quiver in hand, was a middle-aged woman, slender and beautiful, but starting to show her age, as her once shiny blonde hair was now a bit faded and a few strains of grey were starting to show. Her green eyes had a certain luster about them that displayed both seriousness and compassion. She met his eyes with her own, smiled, and said surprisingly, "How did you know it was me?" Flare started to walk toward the two she had rescued, saying, "I would say it's good to see you back after all this time, safe and sound, though I am not sure about the safer part." "What are you talking about?" retorted the man, smiling. "We're perfectly safe, right, Train?" A small whine and whimper came out of the now tired and hungry canine. Finally, she stopped walking and stood in front of the two, taking her bow and tapping the side of the deceased crustacean. "You never were content with the small easy ones, you always got to go for the big ones." She said, almost daring him to deny it. "By your fletching," said the man. "What?" asked the woman quizzically. "Before, you asked how did I know it was you, Flare. Simple. You're the only one I know who still uses the old three-feathered styled and colored fletching in their arrows. Most in the Federation now use the four-feathered. Regardless, who else would come to this little remote island, but those with the connections to know I was here?" said the man with a light, but sarcastic tone to his voice. "Well, it is good to see you're still just as sharp as your sword. Speaking of which," extending her hand forward to the man with his other blade in hand, "you dropped this." "Thanks, I owe you one," said the now very hungry warrior as he took his other blade and returned it to his sheath. "Staying for dinner, Flare?" "Of course, but I am not cooking that thing, Laszlo," replied the archer. "Cook? This guy is already charcoaled," responded the dual sword wielder with a smirk on his face and more sarcasm in his voice than before. Then, he said a bit more casually to his sister, "Come, let's set up camp before it gets dark." Later that evening, as the sun was setting and bellies were full, the brother and sister along with Rain laid upon the beach, looking up at the endless vastness of the expanse of the skies as millions and millions of stars in the heavens twinkled down upon them. "They're so wonderful and numerous, I had nearly forgotten. I hardly ever get out of the palace after dark anymore," said the aging archer in a soft voice. "Really?" asked her brother. "I never thought you the type to be cooped up indoors all day." "Much has changed over the years," she said as her eyes looked to Laszlo and then back to the stars. "We change, but the stars, they don't. They're always the same, always there, just like when I was a little girl." Flair's voice grew more reminiscent in tone, as she turned on her side to look more at Laszlo, who likewise turned his head toward her, but still laid flat on his back. When I was younger, Father would bring me out to the beach of Obel at night just like this. We would try to count the stars. A child's folly, I suppose it would really take many lifetimes to do that. No one lives that long," she said hesitantly, stopping herself in mid-sentence. Her eyes quickly went looking to his and then followed his line of sight down to his left hand, then back to his face, which went from a look of tranquility a moment ago to now one of regret. Quickly, however, Laszlo's countenance returned to normal as his much older-looking sister grabbed his hands and began to apologize profusely. "I am so sorry, I did not mean to." "It is all right," he said firmly, but sincerely. Desiring to change the topic, Laszlo spoke eagerly. "So Lino, I heard the Federation Council has commissioned a ship to be christened in his honor?" "Oh yes, one of the few things I could get them all to agree on. Probably the first and last time that's ever going to happen again," she retorted with a laugh. Flair, closing her eyes as if to imagine something familiar yet still wonderful, said in a hush whisper, "Actually the ship is nearly done. It will be a new flagship. It could probably give the Dauntless a run for its potch, 3-mass, solid oak frame, with teakwood filling, and rune cannons. It was Toff's last project before he retired last year." "Rune cannons?" Laszlo asked quizzically. "I didn't think that there were any left. I thought that Chiral had destroyed the rest." "Well, the ammunition is gone to the best of our intelligence, but we still have a few cannons left themselves, just nothing to fire out of them," she said smiling. "It was Father's idea. You'd be surprised how far a bluff can get you, especially with stupid pirates." "Seriously, that's great. Risky, but brilliant," he said with a smirk. Sitting up, Laszlo turned to Rain, who had fallen asleep, and began to stroke his black and white soft fur very gently so as not to arouse the dog. Again, turning his head and neck toward the vast ocean that glimmered in the night sky and then back to the archer, he said, "You know I have traveled to many different places these last few years and have seen many amazing things, but still nothing is more beautiful than home." "Speaking of your travels, where all did you visit?" asked the blonde woman curiously, though naively. "The northern continent, right?" "Well, yeah, but it's a huge place with many countries. After I re-explored some of the old Kuliuk ruins and towns, I made my way further north to the Scarlet Moon Empire. It had a few interesting towns, but I was most intrigued by a particularly unique temple, as well as a group of elves, who, like the Nanal elves, live in this huge tree. From there, I made my way north by ship to the Kingdom of Highland. It's a small growing country, surrounded by a lot of mountains, but the area to the south of them is made up of several new city-states. I think it's called Jouston. It has lots of open land areas that are all connected by a single lake in the middle, sort of like in Scarlet Moon. The two countries don't seem to get along all that well, but most of the people are pretty nice once you get to know them. I, also, spent a little time in Harmonia and got to see the Crystal Valley. The whole city was larger than any city, larger than any I've ever seen before, with pillars of solid crystal, buildings taller than ships turned on their side, and there were schools, and shops everywhere, and they sold everything that a buyer could possibly want. I tried to keep a low-key though, knowing that some in Harmonia still might be after my rune, but the city is a sight to behold for sure. He continued, after I left Harmonia, I headed southwest to the grasslands. Compared to Harmonia, Scarlet Moon, and the others, most of the people here seemed like backward barbarians, because they are still so tribal and superstitious. Most of those clans fought among themselves. However, it was worth the trip, because, at sunset the orange glow gleams off the fields of wheat and other crops, with such a radiance that it is like watching the sun blush. Finally, I gradually just made my way south, until I found a port city with a ship, which would bring me back here. And here I am," he finished. Again, with her eyes closed, Flare said nothing, but just tried to imagine all the different places he spoke of in her mind's eye. It sounds breathtaking. I would love to see it all myself one day. But I have to ask, you said you went south some. How far south did you go? Further south than the island nations? Further than the islands? No, I've never really been down that way before. Why, you trying to get rid of me again, sis? And so soon? Well, not exactly. However, right now things are not looking good for the peace treaty between the Federation and the Quendom of Falena, said Flare, and she continued to say, typically, those on the council welcome the opportunity for new trade markets. However, now it is divided on creating this agreement. Why would they object to wanting to make money? That doesn't seem very fitting for a politician, retorted the Rune Bearer quizzically. That's just it, there seems to be no good reason why some on the council would object to this deal, unless they had something to gain from the two nations remaining separate, or worse yet at war. Why would the Federation go to war with the country they just recently started forming diplomatic relations with? Asked Laszlo, still puzzled. Flare began to speak a bit with a worry and regret in her voice. About 3 months ago, I authorized a small undercover envoy to go to the Quendom and get a feel for how things are done in their country, so that when official negotiations began, we would have a better understanding of how these people thought, acted, and behaved. Few on the council knew about this. I figured that was for the best. As Father used to say, the less they are involved, the easier things get done. I received 4 communications from them. Nearly all of them seemed positive and said that the people of Falena, overall, were a decent and trustworthy group of people. They had a few odd customs. Like many of the nobles, compete in gladiator games to see who the next husband of the queen will be. However, the queen does rule her people fair and justly. Plus, they just came out of a recent conflict with their neighboring nation called Nagara. Flare went on, we don't know much about the war or this other country other than it is one of 3 big powers on the continent. Falena being the largest, of course. And a third smaller nation that calls themselves New Armies. Apparently, this peace treaty was signed under tenuous circumstances, but for the moment both sides seem to be honoring it. In their last communique, the envoy made mention of a very powerful rune. The people called it the Sun Rune. They believe it to be one of the 27 true runes. No person bears the rune, but it is kept at the palace for safekeeping. It is the symbol of the nation and acts as proof for the royal family's divine right to rule, because apparently only the queen can use its awesome power. There are 2 other lesser, but unique runes, called the Twilight and the Dawn, which help the monarchy rule and govern the Quendom. These 3 runes are very powerful, and the Falenans are very proud of them and are very protective of their national treasures. Gaining access to any one of these runes requires special permission, as each is under heavy guard as would be expected. Flare concluded. Fighting to become a husband, all-powerful queens, 3 deadly solar runes. Sounds like a real, friendly place, said Laszlo with an obvious tone of sarcasm. Further stating, I failed to see how this would cause our 2 nations to go to war, especially if the Falenans just got out of a war and are enjoying peace again. Wait. You don't think those on the council wanted war with Falena to get a hold of those runes or something, do you? Flare, looking back up to the nightly heavenly hosts, spoke. I don't know, at this point I can't rule anything out. However, the reason for the threat of war is because last month the envoy was supposed to come back to Obel to deliver its final report to me. But the ship that was supposed to be carrying them never made it back to port. I could not launch an official investigation, given their mission was a clandestine one. We think pirates might have been involved, at least those were the rumors I heard from Nao, who I asked to look into things for me. You might have heard Dario retired from piracy, so his son commands things now. Anyways, Nao said that he heard a rumor that these pirates were hired by someone powerful living in the Quendom, that had learned of the envoy's true purpose for visiting the country and wanted these would-be spies eliminated. She finished. "Wait, you don't think the Queen or any of her people hired these pirates, do you?" asked Laszlo. "Perhaps, I just don't know, but last week the Federation received an official invitation to come to Falena and begin diplomatic talks. Given all that has happened, I had to tell the rest of the council about the envoys and their mysterious disappearance," said Flare. "Oh, I bet they were happy with you, after you shared all that wonderful news with them, eh?" said the dual sword master with a bit of humor in his tone. "Oh yes, I'm certain to be nominated for their favorite councilman of the year, this year, but most understood and knew that I only had the island's best intention in mind. Regardless, the council still has decided to move forward to begin trade negotiations, despite the voices of some who objected to the proposed talks. The council has asked Desmond and Tanya to go as our official representatives," said the chairwoman in a relieved voice. Her brother now sat up and looked at her. Tanya learned her lessons well from Lady Eleanor. Her sharp wit and keen tactical insights would prove useful in negotiations and perhaps in ferreting out who hired those pirates. Plus, Desmond is a good choice. He is charming, personable, and knows how to get things done. I could see why they chose him. Everyone trusts him and respects him even after all these years. Smiling and then giggling to herself, Flare responded, "Yeah, with that curly grey hair and beard he does have a certain grandfather-like quality about him, and Tanya's tactical prowess is second to none in the Federation. That's why they asked her even though she is a private citizen now." "Okay, this is all good and fine, Flare, but how do I fit into all of this?" he asked. "Simple, Mr. Ambassador," she retorted. "You can't be serious. The council wants me to go?" "No. I want you to go. Desmond and Tanya are skilled at politics but not battle. If someone is trying to sabotage negotiation, they may need protection. Officially, you will just be another Federation negotiator. Unofficially, however, I want you to try to uncover this plot as well as to protect the others. I'm sorry to ask this of you, especially since you just got back, but right now I don't know who I can trust on the council and in Falena. And, if there really is some powerful force out there trying to stop this treaty, then I need someone that I can count on and someone who I know will be strong enough to face it should the need arise. So, I need your help. Plus, God forbid, if these 3 runes are as powerful and dangerous as the letter suggested they are and they got used against us, then we may need another true rune just as powerful and dangerous to protect us and this country we love," Flare declared with both the tone of a confident leader and the concern of a mother figure in her words. "So, will you do it?" Laszlo, looking down at his left hand, then to his sister, and then up into the night sky, said, "I will help you. I hope it doesn't come down to war and a battle of runes, but after traveling all around this world these past few years, I have learned that there really is no place like home. I love this land, these islands, the ocean, the warmth, and the people. I fought and nearly died for their freedom once before and I will fight to protect them once again. I just have one request." "Sure, anything," replied Flare. "Will you watch after Rain for me while I'm gone?" asked the dog owner. Flare started to laugh and pet the dog on his head. "Of course, I'll watch him, Laszlo. That's what big sisters are for when brothers go out of town, dog sitting and watering plants too, of course." Both laughed as they turned their gaze back up towards the heavenly twinkling lights. Just then a shooting star passed by overhead. "Look," said Flare, "make a wish. Hurry." Laszlo quickly thought one thing first and then a second thought entered his mind, choosing quickly between the two. He whispered under his breath, "I wish to know peace again,